So you don't think this is going to I guess what I'm looking for please Oh, no, I know. Well, she was going to go to Costa Rica, so, and I've never been to Costa Rica, so I wanted to get all of the information. She had
That's happening.
It's just off the coast. Aruba. And quite a number of these Caribbean.
But anyway. Jerry's very big show.
They'll often do that.
I'm aware of the weather, as we all are, so I thought perhaps we could get the railroad moving on time. This is a very, very special event. I welcome each and every one of you. We think that the Center for Women in Science is extremely important to the Mount and to our mission. The fact that women are underrepresented in science nationally, provincially, is not a surprise. So we, being Canada's only women's university, feel it's part of our mission to offer the best facilities that we can to women and to encourage more women to go into scientific fields. Now, I should take a minute to acknowledge and really applaud my predecessor, Dr. Naomi Kersom's commitment to this center. This, in some measure, in fact, in large measure, was her own feeling and commitment to encouraging that as an integral part of the capital campaign, the Leading and Learning campaign. So she recognized the need, and she really initiated this project. It's been my great privilege to see it through, and my own commitment is not in doubt either. I think it's significant that the center is named for Sister Catherine Wallace, Dr. Catherine Wallace, who was the 4th president of Mount St. Vincent University. And I'd like to welcome some of Dr. Wallace's relatives who came all the way from Massachusetts. This is Rita Wallace, Catherine Wallace's sister. She's from Lawrence, Massachusetts. And Barbara Yellen and her grandson, Billy, or William Billings, who are from New Hampshire. And I've already asked Billy if he wouldn't like to consider the mountain. But it's easy for them to come up, so we very much welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thank everybody Catherine would enjoy this and love it. I don't think, maybe she's watching you today.
She is.
And I'm very thankful to all of you.
It's a real pleasure and an honor to have you here and to name this in honor of Dr. Catherine Wallace. Most of you know a great deal about her. I'll skim over this briefly. She was nationally known for her views on the status of women and was certainly a leader in that area, as recognized by the award of the Order of Canada. She was the chair of the AUCC Standing Committee on the Status of Women. She was a board member of the Canadian Catholic Bishops' Commission on the role of women in the church. She was appointed to the first federal advisory committee of on the status of women. She pioneered outreach to women in continuing education, and now continuing education is the norm. But in those days, it was quite unique, and not surprisingly, the Mount under Dr. Wallace was a leader. She was sensitive to the role the Mount could play in serving women on the national field and the national scene, and she certainly played an active role in making that happen and was the embodiment of that. She was well known and respected for her contribution to education. She was the first women director, or it would be equivalent of being on the board of governors of the AUCC, the Association of Universities and Colleges in Canada. And in 1973, she was its first female president. And I suspect there has been no female president of the AUC since her, but I may be wrong. She certainly was the first chair of the MPHEC, the Maritime Provinces Higher Education Commission, and was really instrumental in the development and success of that institution. She was awarded the prestigious Vanier Medal, and she's the only woman to have been awarded that in 30 years. So again, a leader, and continues to be a leader in those fields. She was very much instrumental in the Dow Mount Agreement and a similar agreement with NASCAD, which is cooperation. We at the Mount take great pride in the fact that we've always been a leader in cooperation with other universities, and the chair of the council is here, so we do cooperate, we do collaborate. And she was very much behind that. She was concerned with international development and education for women, and I know if she were here, she would applaud our designation as the INSTRA focal point for the UN development for research into the study and training of women. She believed in freedom as a means to personal growth, and she was the leading light between having students involved in the determination of university affairs and policy. And David Wynn, I know you're in the room. She's the reason you're on the Board of Governors. That's another thing. She was a member of the board of a number of institutions that will be familiar to you. The Canadian Organization for Peace and Development, CUSO, the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, again, one of the first female directors of a business in Canada, the Atlantic Board of the Canadian Council of Christians and Jews, Maritime Tel, and many others. She was a trustee for IRPP, the Institute for Research and Public Policy, a member, and this is when I had the opportunity to meet her, although I never had the opportunity to know her, of the Royal Commission, the Macdonald Commission, into the Economic Union and Development Prospects for Canada. She was an American, and I can relate to that, and came to Canada and became a Canadian, and her commitment to Canada was without question. She was a person of vision. She was a person of action. There is a display out in front, and we will eventually have a permanent display. Before she died, she brought her, and I think Rosemary Dean Sampson is in the back, can talk to you perhaps more about this later, but she came and she brought many of her personal mementos, and she wanted the university to have them. So they will be in a permanent display, but they are extraordinary, and I invite you to look at them. She was certainly here at the time the new charter for the Mount to become a university in 1966 was granted. Under her came the completion of Assisi, Rosario, Seton, Birches, our major buildings. She planned a major expansion of the library, and in fact, that is why this is now the Catherine Wallace Centre, because this used to be a good deal of this renovation was the library. She was very much a non-traditional woman in the tradition of the Mount. The opening of this center is very much, again, a tribute to her, and is truly consistent with her contribution to the Mount. I'd like to recognize a few other special guests. The Premier sent his regrets, as did Joel Matheson, and our MP, Howard Crosby. I think in part the weather has done them in. Also Karen Stone, who was the president of our Alumni Association, could not come, but we do have a very special person here, at least we think he is, the Minister of Education, the Honourable Guy Leblanc. I'd like to ask you to come and say a few words.
Thank you very much. I came prepared. I drive four-wheel drive, and I also have an extra pair of set of skis in the car. I'm always prepared for this Nova Scotia weather. But I'm starting to think that I may be jinxed, because I had an official announcement to make at a school last week, and I had to cancel it twice because of bad weather. Today we're opening the Catherine Wallace Centre, and we had another opening at NSIT of a centre this afternoon, and still have a storm. So I think I'm going to stay home and have some other people do that and find the weather. Of course, I'm also very proud to bring greetings from the Premier and our government for the official opening of this Catherine Wallace Centre for Women in Science. Catherine Wallace led this university through a most significant period of renewal. Later working through the Maritime Provinces Higher Education Commission, she promoted cooperation among universities. She saw the value of Nova Scotia universities having a unique identity, yet still working together very closely to achieve common aims. The Catherine Wallace Centre for Women in Science is clearly consistent with the Mount's historic commitment to the education of women. That continuing commitment makes the Mount unique amongst Nova Scotia universities, and I dare say, in Canada. In recent years, the Mount has also established itself as a centre for studies about women, their history, their current status in society, and their progress towards fuller participation in all aspects of our common life. Catherine Wallace Centre for Women in Science continues those traditions in the sciences. These are areas where women should and will enter in growing numbers in the future. For women, the sciences represent many excellent and available career opportunities. For Nova Scotia, more women in science will produce economic benefits and social progress. I also congratulate Mount St. Vincent University for its initiative in securing funding for this centre and for establishing the endowment in the name of another distinguished and accomplished Canadian, Jean Sauvé. Such financial support is itself a vote of confidence in Mount St. Vincent University and its unique mission. I'm sure this new venture will fully warrant that confidence. It remains for me to express my best wishes for the future of the Catherine Wallace Centre for Women in Science and for all the students, teachers, and researchers who will find an academic home here. I also want to thank the family of our honored person whose name this centre bears for coming, and also possible future students at this university. I can tell you that if you've been recruited to come here, you've chosen a fine university, and I encourage you to come again. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure both to thank the Minister and to introduce myself to anyone who doesn't know me. I'm Dale Godeson, and I'm Chair of the Board of Governors here. Thank you, Mr. Minister, for your words. And I think your slip of the tongue on Acadian and Jean Sauvé. No, I mean it seriously, because Jean Sauvé was not from Quebec. Jean Sauvé was from Manitoba. And she and you both share in the rich historic tradition of francophones in Canada. So I think that was very apt. And I want to say that we are very pleased that you got here in your four-wheel drive. And I did watch your press conference on TV the other day when you were the only person there, no Jews, no teachers. Lots of press, which is what politicians always want. And it was a good press conference and very good news coverage, if I may say so. So I hope that this one does as much. The government of Nova Scotia has been very generous to this Women in Science Centre. I'm one of the few people speaking, I think, who was here at the beginning of the seed of the idea that brought us to today. I don't think we envisioned quite such a snowy day when we started thinking about both the Learning and Leading campaign and the Women in Science Centre. We have raised 90% of the $8 million we set out to do, 7.26 million, and much of that does come from the government of Nova Scotia, and 1.5 in particular was designated for that goal, to encourage women to enter more actively into science. As well, the MPHEC grant of $900,000, and the rest was made up from monies that over the years have been given by all of you and by the community that supports Mount St. Vincent University. I think there's a lot of congruence in all of us here today, because I see Janet Halliwell as a scientist here who is a chair of our Nova Scotia Council of Higher Education. And you see Catherine Wallace, who was at MPHEC, and you see renewal in both of their lives. And one of the things that I noted about Catherine Wallace as I watched her over the years as a community member, as someone who was involved in public policy in my own way, was that she very quietly simply went ahead and did things and made changes. And I've sat in a lot of meetings on this campus, a lot of meetings. And one of the things that frequently has been said is that she's one of our unsung heroes. And finally, no more an unsung hero. Because I think the naming of this center is a very, very small recognition of the change that she brought to this university. Liz's comment, non-traditional in the tradition of the Mount, is very true of the Mount. When we were on the search committee which picked Liz, I looked around the room, and everyone at the table, all 11 of us, were Canadian citizens. But 4 of the 11 had brought their American heritage to bear on this selection, which had nothing to do with the choice of her. This is a university that is open to non-traditional ways of achieving traditional things like excellence. So on the one hand, we are rooted in our past and enhanced by our tradition, whether it be our Catholic tradition or excellence. On the other hand, we are open to new ways of doing things. And Dr. Catherine Wallace, she had many roles in her life, had an innovative way of approaching things. Let me tell you a very small story. I know Liz mentioned that Catherine Wallace was a member of the McDonald Royal Commission, and I noted that particularly because my husband was secretary or executive director of that commission. And when they came to Halifax, and all of the commissioners in their blue suits, you know, in blue suits, sat around the table doing all sorts of very intelligent things, Catherine Wallace left the meeting very briefly early at lunch one day, and she went down to a food bank to show that the people who were planning Canada's future cared about the people who were front. And that to me is a story that gives you the spirit that brought her into the sisterhood, that brought her to Mount St. Vincent, that sent her out to work, whether it was in corporate boardrooms or whether it was in MPHEC. So I think it's extremely fitting that we have Janet Halliwell here as the chair of the Nova Scotia Council, and as past chair of the Science Council of Canada, and also as director of research and various other things at NSERC, and a scientist with her degree in chemistry, to talk to us a little bit about the special place and her perceptions of the special place that the Mount has in both the university system in Nova Scotia, but in encouraging and supporting women's goals of being more involved in the scientific life of this community. And she too in her life has exemplified many of the themes that Sister Catherine Wallace, Dr. Catherine Wallace, you can see when I met Catherine Wallace, it's very difficult to get away from these. She exemplifies in her life much of what the Mount stands for, much of what Catherine Wallace stood for, which is a new style enriched by tradition and excellence. So the revitalization and renewal that started with Catherine Wallace, which has been a theme for us, is once again wagging its tail on the scene, and is being brought to us by the chair of the Nova Scotia Council, Janet.
Thank you very much, Dale. And it really is a great delight to join you, despite the interesting trip that I had getting out here. I find that people are now starting to blame me for bringing this weather to Nova Scotia. They say no winter isn't quite this bad. But it is a special celebration, and I think that we're all just delighted to mark the opening of the Catherine Wallace Centre for Women in Science. And I have to congratulate the Mount for its vision and the initiative in turning what is a national concern about the low number of women who are entering science and mathematics in our university system, turning that national concern into a reality, something that will work. This center. It is a beacon for women who might otherwise not take up the opportunities offered through the doorway of science. Because science is a doorway to many careers. The most obvious, of course, is working in the practice of science or engineering. There are many others. There are the rich opportunities in the binding and blending the understanding of science on the one hand with other disciplines, be it management, be it the humanities, the social sciences, economics. I'll consider my own case, for example. While my career pattern has been distinctly unorthodox, it's firmly based in science and mathematics. Those were my two subjects, undergraduate. But I've had the very good fortune of using that science foundation in a broader context of public policy, particularly as it pertains to higher education, but also more generally. I want those doors to be open for the women of today and tomorrow. And those doors must be inviting and welcoming. But we've got a long way to go. By 1989-90, women represented more than 50% of all students in Canadian universities. So that's a phenomenal rise from 37% in 1970-71. Those of you who know me know I specialize in good news, bad news stories. That's the good news. The bad news is that women are still not choosing careers. They're not choosing courses or study in science, particularly the physical sciences and mathematics. They're not choosing engineering. But let's take a look at some of the numbers. In 1989, only 20% of the graduates in computing science, the bachelor's level, were women. What was it in physics? 14%. In point of fact, there were actually 32 fewer women in 1990-91 in all physical sciences and mathematics in the Maritimes than there had been a decade before. We are dropping. We are not moving up. So despite the 50% women in universities, somehow we are not attracting them. And as you move along that educational pipeline through the master's and the PhD programs, you will find the percentages of women drop. One could take that computer science percentage that was 20% here. It drops to 16% and then 13%. Physics, the numbers, the master's and the PhD level, are 7% and 6%. So we aren't even producing the women who can transmit the excitement, the value, and the interest in science. Science-based career. We don't have that pipeline. We've got to nurture, we've got to develop that pipeline. We have to all renew and strengthen our efforts to pave the way for women in science and using science. And of course, we know that there are many factors influencing study and career choices among women. A large number of these occur in early childhood and relate to sex role stereotyping. And I have to acknowledge the many special initiatives that have been launched, some by the Department of Education, some by our educators, by organizations like the Discovery Centre in town, launched to try to entice young people, and particularly girls, into science, to try to reverse any bias. But it's all the more important that as we see the intensification of those efforts at the early grade, to match them with initiatives and opportunities in higher education. And that's what the Mount is doing. Because we're talking about life in a new world economy in which the development and application of science and technology is at the heart of economic growth. That requires a social environment in which discovery, invention, and innovation flourish. But a society in which a large portion of its population is effectively disenfranchised from active participation because they don't have science or technology is not in keeping with what we think of as Canada. Nor does it permit adequate participation of women in the public debates on the use of science and technology. This is an increasingly important element of citizenship. We're wrestling with questions of environmental sustainability, incinerators in the backyard, decaying urban infrastructure. Women must be able to take their full role in such public debates. So we're talking about the practitioners of science. We're also talking about the general citizen who must have access to science, who must understand it. So we have to educate and train for both the broader purposes of society and the development of particular intellectual skills. We can't have one without the other if we hope to succeed either socially or economically in Nova Scotia. And acquiring both requires cultural and institutional change. And that's what we've got here today, is cultural and institutional change. We're celebrating an exciting initiative to open wider that doorway of science. It's also fully appropriate that we honor, in the name of the Centre, a leader and a woman, Catherine Wallace. She's contributed so much to higher education here in Nova Scotia and the Maritime region. And I think this blend is particularly fortunate. So it really gives me great pleasure to now move to the technological part of this ceremony. And I have been asked to move back to my roots in chemistry. Now, I have here, without a lab coat, a certain experiment which I wish to perform. I'm not sure if I should look skeptical of the lab system. However, we are opening a special experiment. We are opening Mount St. Vincent University equals women in science. And because it is only appropriate, all ceremonies have a little bit of excitement. Whoops, don't. And all experiments require assistance. I can do it. Do each one of us. Now this is an experiment that has a backup. When technology fails, you go to more archaic technology and
It falls to me to thank a number of people, to begin with, all those who have come before and spoken so eloquently about Sister Catherine Wallace and the significance of our center and our opening. It's an exciting day for me. I've been involved with this project from the beginning, and it's always nice to see something actually come together and finish when you sit in jobs such as I'm sitting in at the moment. So thank you very much, and thank you, Dr. Halliwell, for your very appropriate remarks. It seems to be very fitting in every way that you be with us today. Normally, giving thanks to those who have helped in something is a little bit like reading a page out of a telephone book. So I thought that I would try and cast it in a slightly different light, and it seemed to me that since the Academy Awards is on it, that I would imagine this as a kind of film project where we have promoters, producers, directors, leading actors, a supporting cast, and a crew. And unlike the crew of the film classic Casablanca, the writers for this project always knew how the story was going to come out. The promoters, I think, primarily were the faculty themselves, the science departments, their sense, their vision of what their facilities should be for their students, for themselves, and the research they wanted to do. And administrators such as myself gathered their ideas and tried to translate them into visions, became a nexus for the project that began in 1989 when we moved out of the north wing of Everestus and into the E. Margaret Fulton Center. The producers, well, here thanks must go specifically, I think, to Presidents Naomi Hersom and Liz Parr-Johnson for their strong support for this project. All of their vice presidents. The members of the board, particularly the finance committee. They drew from the bankroll provided by the Learning and Leading campaign. They were the angels of the project, to carry the metaphor forward. And major contributions, of course, from the government of Nova Scotia and donations from a myriad of individuals and organizations. And when I'm talking about the support of the board, I have to mention in particular Frank Nolan, a board member who provided me with much solid advice when we were in the early stages. The directors. The directors in this category were the architects, but for me as well, the users group. From chemistry and physics, Dr. Susan Boyd. From math and computer studies, Dr. John Sayer. Elia Blum and John Reed were stand-ins when the going got dangerous. They were Dr. Barbara Rao from biology with Sheila Martin. Mr. Sheila Martin is a stand-in for that department. And Dr. Margaret Ellison from human ecology and Dr. Don Smith from the Tourism Hospitality Management. These people were very important in this project because they wove our science faculty directly into the project from start to finish and helped to make it what it is. The leading actors. I think to me the star was the sparkling gem of Fowler Ball, Ariane Clements. And to Mr. Bill Hyde has the good pleasure to have Ms. Clements on his staff. I think she took a rough outline, transformed it into a detailed plan, and developed an instant rapport with all of the users group, which helped propel this project forward. Once the project got going, I think the next leading actors were Terry Gallagher, the project manager, Paul Rhino, the director of physical plant. The supporting cast, well, this is the Cecil B. DeMille cast of thousands, I suppose. The contractors, Mr. Frank Dixon and all of those others who translated plans into structures and systems. Those who endured the construction phase in Evaristus, couldn't find a place to park. Those who were relocated to the mother house and sat in what must have seemed at times a kind of Coventry. The organizers, the users group again, and Mary Moulton and her staff for putting together all of the details in the opening day. And the members of Physical Plant, of course, who shifted this, that, and the other thing, including people. I think the supporting cast, in short, drew in a great deal of our university community, and time simply prevents their individual identification. So, on behalf of the students and faculty, on behalf of myself, Rich Stewart, Dean of Humanities and Sciences here, I thank you one and all, named or anonymous. You were each instrumental in this project's successful completion, and you've made me very proud to be associated with it, and I thank you very much. We now turn to the planting of a time capsule, I think, and Liz, we were going to...
You may know that Karen Stone is the president of our Alumni Association. Unfortunately, I think Karen got snowed in, so we've asked, as her stand-in, Gretchen Nickle to plant the time capsule, to do the honors around the time capsule. Gretchen, if you would please do this.
It's really hard to stand in for someone the very last minute, but I'll do my best to give you this sort of feeling that Karen and the rest of the Alumni Association would hope that is in that time capsule, that feeling and that part of the mount. We have over 45 items, believe it or not, in our time capsule, and we feel that we've put quite a lot of work and effort into it to give everyone the feeling and the pride of our new center. We have Alumni Association pins, examples of our Folio Montana. We've had contributions from many individuals in the science department, including Nick Hill, who's actually given us a tube of fungus. Not quite sure what's going to happen to it in 30 years' time, but hopefully we'll check it out. We have letters from Dr. Parr-Johnson and Dr. Stewart, and we have a letter from Karen Stone to the president of the Alumni Association in 30 years' time. One of the items that's in the capsule that really captures the spirit is a letter and a drawing from a little girl from the Child Center Study. Sorry, Child Study Center, sorry about that. Her name is Emily King, and she wrote this little letter on her drawing, and I'll read it to you. It says, "Dear Mount, I hope your children are doing good. If somebody is sick, I hope they will be feeling better soon. Dear Mount, wherever you are, one part of me will be with you." And we feel that Emily sort of has said it all. We feel that this center gives Catherine Wallace. Catherine Wallace will now always be with us. This center is a beacon to guide others into science and follow in her footsteps. We also feel that all the items in the time capsule, when they're open in 30 years, will represent us here today in the opening of this center. So I conclude in inviting you all back in 30 years' time to open the capsule, and Karen would like me to put forth the challenge to the students that are here today that in 30 years' time, you put in another time capsule that will be open in the future. My thanks for asking me to stand in for Karen, and she greets you all today. Thank you.
I want to thank Gretchen again. This was a very last-minute stand-in. She did a beautiful job. Thank you. A couple of last-minute things here to finish up. The minister did mention the Jean Sauvé Endowment. We have plans for an endowment with a goal of $150,000 for various activities, including bursaries and equipment purchases in the area of women in science. And this endowment is named in honor of Jean Sauvé. We're halfway to our goal. We hope in not too distant future to have that endowment completed. Her son, Jean-Francois, was invited and could not come, and we regret, as he does, his inability to be here, but he sends his greetings. And I think it's appropriate that this be named in honor of the Honourable Jean Sauvé, because she again was a very non-traditional woman in the Mount tradition. She has an honorary degree from the Mount. I think you're aware of that. And the combination of Dr. Catherine Wallace and Jean Sauvé is very, very appropriate for Mount St. Vincent. I'd like to thank you all for coming. I do invite you, as Gretchen does, to come back in 30 years. I certainly intend to be here, and I challenge you all to be here with me. So with that, I declare the Catherine Wallace Centre for Women in Science officially open. Thank you. We will have tours. A couple of things. You may have noticed a video. The video will, it will be a record for us, but there is Catherine Wallace's sister Alice because of her health, could not come today. So that is our gift, if you will, our thank you to Alice, and we will ask Rita to take it back with you, if you will.
Thank you very much.
And there will now be tours. There are students here to give guided tours of the entire facility, which is 3 floors. So, over to you.
I'm a student here, and I'm going to graduate after 4 years, 5 years being here. Nice to see you. Thank
Great, what time?
working on their assignments and projects. Computer science, there's also the nutrition uses computer and the psychology people, so it's not just computer science students. The computer is being incorporated into a lot of programs now, so.
Is this a mainframe that they run off?
Pardon?
Are these microcomputers, are they standalone computers, or?
These would be
or
hooked up to
major?
the backs.
The backs,
These are
okay.
not the micros.
No, okay.
So.
Yes. Would they be available to students after hours too?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Because we work late on our projects.
Sure.
Experiments for doing the labs and presenting to the students. More preparation room and where they'll be cleaning the different glassware. And
Still working?
It's actually nice.
Wallace. So you can read a little bit about her there. And also, we have a plaque here. And this press actually went out to outer space, and it came back to us.
So it's a seasoned space traveler.
Yes. And we can move out here to where the time capsule is installed. There's a little display and where our capsule will be. And if you want to take a peek at our beautiful sign for the center.
It's a definite change in ambience as you move through the doors.
So which is the tube with the fungus?
We'll move right along. We still have a lot more to see.
This must be the fungus. Does that look like fungus?
I can't see one. I would have thought you'd see one that saw one concealed glass at both ends for lyophilized.
They said something about,
This is what turns your room out, does it?
Come around this way a little bit so we can get a picture. There we go. Just look at the display. Look up at the display. Look up. Stay right there. Great, thank you.
Thank you. And they're all going to stay in here, and then 30 years from now, they'll open that up.
Oh, rats. Well, by then, you'll be watching. And we come right through here.
Go ahead.
To our chemistry lab. This is Dr. Dow.
Go ahead.
In this lab, I'm being helped out today by Sylvia Gillis, who worked with me last summer as an NSERC summer scholar, and this year is the winner of a 1967 scholarship from NSERC, and so is going on to graduate studies. And also Kim Nelson, who has won an NSERC scholarship for this coming summer, so will be working with me in the lab here. In this lab, we're doing work on the production of antibiotic compounds by a type of bacteria called streptomyces. Pictures on the wall there of some cultures. We're interested mainly in the genetics of that production. And so we've set up a few little things for you to see here today. Over on this bench. We have some purified antibiotic. This is an antibiotic called Godeson that I've been working on. And we've done some plates here where we've spread some indicator bacteria and spotted some of the Godeson on these little paper discs, and then incubated the plates, let the bacteria grow up. And you can see there are zones of inhibition where the indicator bacteria won't grow very well because of the Godeson, which is diffusing into the medium. So it inhibits the growth of some bacteria, this antibiotic. Over here, we just have a setup where sometimes we want to look at the actual DNA and the genes that are involved in the production of these antibiotic compounds. So it involves sometimes a technique called DNA electrophoresis, where we put the DNA in a little gel bed and run an electric current through that, and the DNA pieces get separated out according to their size. And you can see the pieces of DNA if you stain the DNA with a special stain and then view it under ultraviolet light. So we've set that up for you here. This isn't a really excellent DNA gel, but we wanted to sort of overload it so you could see it without the lights turned off. And you see these little glowing bands. That would represent bands of DNA. This is an ultraviolet light transilluminator. So we need a blocking screen now because that kind of light is quite dangerous. And if we want to grow the cultures of streptomyces in a liquid media, which is usually the case in order to produce the antibiotics and isolate them, these cultures like lots of oxygen, just like people, and so when we grow them, we have to aerate them in a little shaking machine, and that's what those cultures don't.
No, not there. We'll move right through here. You can see we're still moving in and installing. Don't do that. I have a feeling I'd like to do. Yes. We have more studies for you to look at, and Dr. James will present this.
My special subject is solid state chemistry. All right, so instead of working with gases or liquids, we work with solids. And the first thing we do is make crystals. And I have some beautiful crystals in the stereo microscope. Maybe would like to look at them. Would you like to look at them here? When you stand up there, and maybe you have to stand right up and then do it. Can you see anything?
Uh-huh.
What color are they?
Red.
Red. Okay, they're red. That's the solution around it. The crystals themselves are actually yellow. And they were, what did they look like? They were really...
They look like crystals with weird shapes.
Yeah.
Student records, student academic progress reports, registration, certification, and graduation. But for example, here at the Mount, the admissions operation is with the registrar's office. At other universities, it might not be. It might be a separate reporting structure.
So they report to you, do they, the admissions office?
Yes, yeah.
And when you came here, did you come specifically as registrar?
No, I came as an admissions officer.
Oh.
That's how I started. And I was in admissions for 4 years, and then I became registrar in 1980.
So 1976.
Mm-hmm.
And the staff in both departments has probably grown, hasn't it?
It has. It hasn't grown quite as to the extent that our actual population grew within that time. But yes, it has grown, and we now stand at 11.
All females?
Yes. That's an interesting point, actually, Margot, that registrars, there are a larger number of female registrars in Canada now than ever before. And that is a new and recent development. although when the positions began way back, shall we say at the beginning of the 20th century, a number of registrars were women when it was considered to be a recognized class. Then of the change in the professional climate in the university. The distinction of having the highest concentration of female registrars in the country. But what is unfortunately more common is that the registrar position, in other words, the registrar is a male, and all the associates and assistants are females. Which somewhat mirrors the sense in academia as well, where often the, what do they call the women in academia are often called the A-team, the assistants and the associates.
Oh.
In fact, that's a term that's used sort of.
People would know what you meant when you
Yes.
said the A-team.
The A-team, right. My skirt's too short. Edit that out.
I'm not shooting that wide, actually. I'm shooting pretty tight.
Good.
You're not a graduate of the Mount, or?
No, I'm not, because when I did my, well, I will be soon. I'm finishing a Master of Arts degree in Ed Psych, so I will finally have a Mount degree.
In art?
In educational psychology.
Oh.
No, I did my undergraduate work in the United States. And then I've also done graduate work at Dalhousie and at McMaster.
So there's no end to the number of degrees you're
Oh,
going to
no,
get?
there is an end. No, there is an end. It's just that I found that once I got into university administration, that I was always in a milieu where ideas and learning were important. And so I tended to take advantage of the opportunity to study as well as work.
Here at the Mount, are there special needs or challenges for women that your office encounters?
Well, I think that female students share a lot in terms of the challenges that they encounter in being university students, depending on the stage of life that they happen to find themselves at the university. Certainly I find here that a great number of our students